Okay, so today's class video isn't working, so here's the video I'm going to do to go over the examples that we went over in class today. So today's words that we're going to be using are the greatest common factor, and we're also going to be talking about roots, solutions, and zeros of quadratic equations. So let's go over this review question. So it asks you which expression is equivalent to m squared minus 13m minus 30. So remember, what we do is we call this A, this B, and this C. So we're going to look at C, and we're going to talk about the two factors of C that'll add up to B. So when C is negative, so we know that we need a positive and a negative set of factors to multiply to a negative number. And so here we need a positive and a negative factor of negative 30 to add up to negative 13. The correct combination will be negative 15 and 2. So that's how we get m minus 15 times m plus 2. So that should be answer choice F. So remember, we talked about trinomials being in standard form. So last week we talked about trinomials where a equals 1. So there was no number in front of x squared. But this week we're going to be talking about trinomials where a does not equal 1. And so that we're going to be using a little bit different method than we talked about last week. So how do you factor when a does not equal 1 and the trinomial is not a special pattern? That's going to be the question for today. So we're going to be basically following similar steps. First, you're always going to want to look for a GCF. Then you're going to look for any special patterns. And then if a equals 1, you're going to do the same steps you did last week. And if a does not equal 1, we're going to do the new steps that we learned this week. So let's look at this question. So it says 2x squared minus 12x plus 18. So you see what's different from last week is that there's a number in front of the x squared term. So we're going to look first for a GCF. So if you notice 2, 12, and 18 have a GCF of 2. So I can factor out a 2 from this equation. So I'm going to divide a 2 out of every term. And so what that leaves me with is 2 times 2 and 2 will cancel, so that's x squared, minus 12 over 2 is 6, so 6x plus 18 over 2 will be 9. So when I factor this, I need two factors of 9 that add up to negative 6. So since 9 is positive and 6 is negative, I'm going to need two negative factors. So the two factors that work are negative 3 and negative 3. So this is going to be 2 times x minus 3 times x minus 3. Or I can write that as 2 times x minus 3 squared. So here's another example. So here a does not equal 1, once again. And so we're going to look for a GCF. There's no GCF of 4, 5, and negative 9. It doesn't look like any special patterns, and a does not equal 1. So we're going to need a new set of steps to figure this out. Well, what you do when a does not equal 1 is you take the a and c terms and you multiply them. Okay, so we're going to multiply a times c, which is 4 times negative 9. So that equals negative 36. So since 36 is negative, we need a combination of a positive and negative number in order to multiply to negative 36. So let's list out the factors. So we have 1 and 36, 2 and 18, 3 and 12, 4 and 9, and 6 and 6. So since b is positive, we know that the bigger factor is going to be positive. Remember, when they're opposite sign, the bigger factor always takes the sign of b. So here we're going to make the smaller factors negative, and we're going to see which set adds up to the correct sum. So do you see which set adds up to 5x? It's this one right here, 9 and negative 4. So now what we do when we factor when a does not equal 1 is you take this original trinomial. Okay, so this 4x squared plus 5x minus 9. And what I'm going to do is I'm writing the middle term. Instead of writing 5x, I'm going to write that as minus 4x plus 9x. And that's where this 4 and 9 come from. So I write 4x squared minus 4x plus 9x minus 9. And then put my factors, or put my terms into two groups. Okay? And then in these two groups, I'm going to look at the GCF of each group. So the first set, I'm going to look at the GCF of these. What's the GCF of 4x squared and minus 4x? Well, I can factor out a 4, and I can also factor out an x. So this is 4x squared divided by 4x minus 4x divided by 4x, because I'm dividing out the 4x by moving it up here. So then this becomes 4x times 4x squared over 4x. So the 4 and 4 will cancel. X squared divided by x is just x. And then I have minus 4x divided by 4x. So those will cancel, and that's x minus 1. And then plus, I have 9 times. So I have 9x minus 9. And I've factored out 9 because that's the GCF of these two terms. So when I factor out 9, I have 9 times 9x over 9 is just x, minus 9 divided by 9 is 1. So you see here I have this repeated factor of x minus 1. So that becomes my first factor, x minus 1. And then I write whatever I have left. So 4x plus 9 is what I have left. And that is how you factor trinomials when a does not equal 1. So let's look at a few more examples. So here we have 2x squared plus 7x plus 3. There is no GCF to these three terms. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at a, b, and c. So I'm going to multiply a times c. So that's 2 times 3, which equals 6. And I need two factors of 6 that are going to add up to 7. 6 is positive, and so is 7. So I know I have two positive number factors. So let's look at the factors of 6. They're 1 and 6 and 2 and 3. So the correct set of factors that'll add up to 7 are 1 and 6. So now I'm going to rewrite my polynomial. So I write that as 2x squared plus 1x plus 6x plus 3. And I put my terms into two groups. So from 2x squared and 1x, I'm going to factor out my GCF. So they have a GCF of 1x that I can divide out from both terms. So I have x times 2 over 1 is 2. X squared over x is x. Plus 1x over 1x is 1. Plus 6x and 3. If I look at those two terms, the GCF is 3. So I'm going to factor out the 3. So this is plus 3 times 6 over 3 is 2. And then I have x plus 3 divided by 3 is 1. So I write this common factor of 2x plus 1. And then I write what I have left, x plus 3. So let's look at another example. So here I have 2x squared minus 5x minus 12. So here's a, b, and c. I have no GCF of these three terms. So I'm going to multiply a times c. So I have 2 times negative 12, which is negative 24. I need two factors of negative 24 that are going to add up to negative 5. Negative 24, since it's negative, I know I need a positive factor and a negative factor to add up to negative 5. Since 5 is negative, I know that my bigger factor is going to be negative. So when I write out the factors of 24, I get 1, 24, 2 and 12, 3 and 8, 4 and 6. And then I'm going to make the bigger factors negative so that I get my correct combination. So when you look at these and you add up all the factors, the two factors that add up to negative 5, which is the correct sum, is 3 and negative 8. So I'm going to rewrite my polynomial, 2x squared minus 8x plus 3x minus 12. So I have two sets of terms now, and I find the GCF. The GCF of 2x squared and 8x is 2x. So I can divide that out. So that's 2x times 2 over 2 will reduce down to 1. X squared over x is x minus 8 divided by 2 is 4. And then the x terms cancel. Plus 3x and minus 12 have a GCF of 3. So we do 3x over 3 minus 12 over 3. So this is 3 times 3 over 3 will reduce, leaving you with x. 12 divided by 3 is 4. So this equals x minus 4 times 2x plus 3. So today's code word is factor. So make sure that you go to the attendance form and enter the word factor. And that is today's code word. Okay, so let's look at another example. So remember, you always want to check for a GCF first. So we have 9x squared minus 3x and minus 6. So the GCF of these three terms is 3. So if you have a GCF, you always want to factor that out first. So I'm going to factor out 3. So this becomes 9x squared over 3 minus 3x over 3 minus 6 over 3. So what happens is you get 3. 9 over 3 will become 3x squared minus 3 divided by 3 will cancel, and that's x, minus 6 divided by 3 is 2. So now I need to factor this trinomial right here, this 3x squared minus x minus 2. So this is a, this is b, and this is c. So a times c is 3 times negative 2. So that's negative 6. So I need two factors of negative 6 that are going to add up to b. So remember, if there's no number in front of x, that's an implied 1. So I need two factors of negative 6 that add up to negative 1. So the factors of 6 are 1 and 6 and 2 and 3. Since the b term is negative, I'm going to make the bigger factor negative. And so the sum of negative 1 I get when I add 2 and negative 3. So when I write this out, I'm going to leave this 3 alone for now. But then I have 3x squared minus 3x plus 2x minus 2. So this becomes 3 times, here I have my first set of terms. I'm going to factor out that GCF, which is 3x. And then you can do that division. It's going to be x minus 1. Plus here, I'm going to factor out the GCF of 2. And that's going to leave me with x minus 1. So this will become 3 times x minus 1 times 3x plus 2. So don't forget that 3 is that GCF I factored out in the beginning. So don't forget to leave that in your answer. So which expression is a factored form of 2x squared minus 25x plus 63? So remember, once again, you're going to multiply a and c. So you get 2 times 63, which equals 126. And so we need two factors of 126 that are going to add up to negative 25. So you're going to have to list out the factors of 126 and the correct combination of factors that gives us negative 25. So you have 1 and 126, 2 and 63, 3 and 42, 6 and 21. 7 and 18. And so since 126 is positive and b is negative, we know we need two negative factors. So we're going to put a negative sign on all these factors and see which set gives us the correct sum, which is negative 25. And that's actually negative 7 and negative 18. So when we write this out, this is going to be 2x squared minus 18x minus 7x plus 63. So we write our factors in two groups. Here we're going to factor out a 2x, so that's 2x times 2x squared over 2x minus 18x over 2x. So that'll be 2x times 2 will reduce, and that'll leave you with x. 18 over 2 is 9, and the x's will cancel. Here, if you ever have a negative as a leading coefficient, you're going to want to go ahead and factor out that negative. That's usually how we do it. So you can see this negative 7 is there, so I'm just going to factor out the negative 7. So that's negative 7x over negative 7 plus 63 over negative 7. So this is minus 7 times x minus 9. So it's x minus 9 times 2x minus 7. So the correct answer is G. So which expression is equivalent to 24x squared minus 22x plus 5? So there's no GCF that I can factor out, so I'm going to multiply A and C. So when I multiply A and C, I get 24 times 5, which is 100. And I need two factors of 100 that are going to add to negative 22. Well, you can see here that 22 is negative, so I know I need two negative factors. So the two negative factors I'm going to get by listing out all my factors of, sorry, that's 120. I need to list out all the factors of 120. And so the factors of 120 are 1 and 120, 2 and 60, 3 and 40, 4 and 30, 5 and 24, 6 and 20, 8 and 15, and 10 and 12. So here I have A times C is positive and B is negative, so all my factors are going to be negative. And then what you have to do is see which set of factors gives you the correct sum. And this last set of factors right here, 10 and negative 12, that is what gives me the factor of the sum of negative 22. So when I write this out, this is going to be 24x squared minus 12x minus 10x plus 5. So my first set of terms, I'm going to factor out a 12, leaving me with 2x squared minus 1. Factor out 12x, leaving me with 2x minus 1. Minus, and then here, remember, when you have a leading coefficient that's negative, you're going to want to factor out that negative. So I'm going to factor out a negative 5, and that's going to leave me with 2x minus 1. So the correct answer is 2x minus 1 times 12x minus 5, which is choice C. So finally, we talked about solving, which is finding the roots by factoring. So we're going to be starting to talk about solving equations. So remember, when you solve equations, you want to find a value x equals some number. Okay, so x equals 7 or x equals 3. So far we've been simplifying expressions. Expressions are things that don't have an equal sign in them, but equations have an equal sign in them. And so when we solve and we find the values of x, that's also called finding the roots, zeros, or solutions. So it's basically what happens when you take the polynomial, set it equal to 0, and find the values of x. So let's look at this example. So it says, what are the roots of x squared minus x minus 6? So this is the kind of trinomial we've been factoring. When it wants us to find the roots, you take x squared minus x minus 6 and you set it equal to 0. Then what you do is you factor it. So you remember the factors of this are x minus 3 and x plus 2. So what this is we use something called the zero product property. So the zero product property tells me that if I multiply two things and that equals 0, that means that either one of them has to equal 0. So let's think about this for a second. The only way to multiply two numbers and get 0 is if one of them is 0. That's what this product property is telling you. So what this tells me is that I have x minus 3 times x plus 2 equals 0. So that means that either x minus 3 equals 0 or x plus 2 equals 0. So what I do now is I have two equations. So these are like equations you solved back in first semester. So what you do is you have x minus 3 equals 0. So you add 3 to both sides. Remember, you do the opposite to solve these equations. So you get x equals 3. Here I have x plus 2 equals 0. So I'm going to subtract 2 from both sides. And that gives me x equals negative 2. So what do you do when you have an equation that's not already set equal to 0? So here I have 9x squared minus 3x equals 6. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off by subtracting 6 from both sides to make it equal 0. So this is 9x squared minus 3x minus 6 equals 0. So now what I need to do is I need to look at the left side and I need to factor it. So factoring is going to follow the same rules we always do. We're going to first look for a GCF. And there is a GCF to 9, 3, and 6. The GCF is 3. So I'm going to go ahead and factor that out of all my terms and see what I have left. So when I do this, I get 3 times 9 over 3 will be 3x squared, minus 3 over 3 will be 1x, minus 6 over 3 will be 2. So now I need to factor this trinomial. So since this is an equation that's set equal to 0, I can divide out that 3, and I don't need to have that there anymore. So if I divide out that 3, I'm left with 3x squared minus x minus 2 equals 0. So now I need to factor this trinomial. So this is A, this is B, and this is C. So what I do is I multiply A times C. So I do 3 times negative 2. That gives me negative 6. So once again, I have a negative product. So I know I have one that's positive and one that's negative. So I need two factors of negative 6 that'll add up to B, which is negative 1. So the correct combination is negative 3 and 2. So when I write this out, I get 3x squared minus 3x plus 2x minus 2 equals 0. So now when I write my factors, 3x squared and 3x have a GCF of 3x. And if I factor that out, that leaves me with x minus 1. Plus 2x minus 2 has a GCF of 2. So if I factor that out, that leaves me with x minus 1. So when I write this, I have x minus 1 times 3x plus 2 equals 0. So now I'm going to set each factor equal to 0. So I say x minus 1 equals 0. I solve that by adding 1 to both sides, and that's x equals 1. And then here I have 3x plus 2 equals 0. And this is a two-step equation. I'm going to have to subtract 2 from both sides. That gives me 3x equals negative 2. And then I have to divide both sides by 3. That gives me x equals negative 2/3. So that's how you get two solutions when you solve equations by factoring. So let's try another example. So if it tells you f of x, remember the first thing to do is you set your equation equal to 0. So this is basically asking us to solve when f of x equals 0. So I'm going to go ahead and set my equation equal to 0. And so I have 12x squared minus 20x minus 8 equals 0. So I'm going to look for a GCF of these three terms, and I can see that it's all divisible by 4. So I'm going to factor out a 4, leaving me with 12x squared over 4 minus 20x over 4 minus 8 over 4. And that equals 0. So this is going to be 4 times 12 over 4 will be 3x squared minus 20 over 4 is 5x minus 2, and that equals 0. Now we can divide out this 4 from both sides. So I have 3x squared minus 5x minus 2 equals 0. So I need to factor this. I need to do a times c, which is 3 times negative 2, and that equals negative 6. I need two factors of negative 6 that add up to negative 5. So my bigger factor is going to need to be negative, so I can do negative 6 and 1, and that's going to add up to negative 5. So I have 3x squared minus 6x plus 1x minus 2 equals 0. So I'm going to group my terms together and find the GCF. The GCF of 3x squared and minus 6x is 3x, and that leaves you with x minus 2, plus the GCF of 1x minus 2 is 1, so it leaves you with x minus 2, and that equals 0. So my two factors are x minus 2 and 3x plus 1, and that equals 0. So now when I set each factor equal to 0, you have x minus 2 equals 0. You add 2 to both sides. That gives you x equals 2. We have 3x plus 1 equals 0. And so I have 3x equals negative 1, and that gives you 3x equals negative 1. Then you have to divide both sides by 3, and that gives you x equals negative 1/3. So that's how you solve equations using factoring.